Yes, so great to see you. I know it's
It's
early
good to see
morning
you,
for
Angie.
you.
Yes?
Welcome to this interview. I had asked you to join us here as an expert on US culture and also on cultural differences in the world. You have been an intercultural expert forever. Um, and
I don't know about forever, but a few years.
you're working from south of Los Angeles in
That's
California.
correct. Yes.
And you already started your business more than 20 years ago.
Hmm.
So you had this foresight when over here people weren't even talking about intercultural differences yet.
Oh, yes, they were.
So please tell me about how you did you get into this field and why are you
Right.
still in here?
Right. Actually, in Europe and the UK, they were talking about cultural intelligence, and that's how I actually discovered the field of cultural differences and understanding how people work. I had the opportunity to live in London and work in for Accenture, a major management consulting firm, and I had work opportunities throughout Europe. And they had suggested that I take a course on intercultural communications and management. And I found a few frameworks around culture that were provided awareness, and the data behind these models were really justified, the content. And I thought, wow, this is great information. If people, are surrounded by cultural differences in Europe, I'm not sure about Americans. So when I returned to the US, I decided to start consulting in cultural intelligence.
Very good.
Yeah.
And I have a German passport still, although I've lived in Switzerland for more than 12 years. And as you
Yes.
know, we love models. Yeah, we're
Yes.
we're we're
Mhm.
very strong in academia, and we love abstract thinking and models. So tell me a bit about the cultural models that you use and how you work with them, and if you have a favorite model.
Absolutely. Good. There are several models, and the value of a model, it provides a framework for discussing cultural differences in a non-judgmental vocabulary.
Mhm.
And what is important is that there isn't a right or wrong or good or bad. It's about comparisons, and it's a starting point. And I want to make sure that people understand that these are generalizations. They are not absolute truths. Okay. And my favorite model is the ICBI, Individual Cultural Blueprint Indicator, because it's a very comprehensive model with 16 cultural differences. We call them
Mhm.
variables, cultural dimensions. And since I've also worked in Asia and I do quite a bit of work in India, Asia, the complexity of the model, or having 16 dimensions, will allow us to um, compare cultures on a global basis. And then also, the other thing that really works for our clients, our multinational clients, is using the ICBI on your team. So all
Mhm.
team members take the assessment and can compare their results on the team, which is, I think, critical. It's important to get an awareness of cultures, by country or border, but I think the most useful thing about this model would be, let's start with our teams. Because there's diversity. Not everyone
Uh-huh.
is going to line up exactly with their country of origin.
That's really, really interesting because essentially, that means I could work in a team and maybe, have a preference and show a preference that is not really connected to my cultural background. Yeah.
Hmm.
But my team members, they might assume that because I have this passport or background that I am like that.
Right.
And the team results would open us up to a discussion about our individual preferences.
Exactly. That's right. Because we don't want to stereotype anyone. Everyone has a unique profile, and we can, we do see patterns. And after coaching and training for 20 years, Americans and Germans, Japanese, Brazilians, I see some of these patterns, but not everyone is, specifically American or specifically Japanese or French, German. Those are absolutely have to look at the models and not stereotype a culture.
Yeah. I think that's really, really critical and important. What comes to my mind as well is, when I look at the stories of some of our viewers that I'm expecting to view this program, they have already bicultural backgrounds. They've lived in several countries. They now live in a totally different country than maybe where they grew up.
Yes.
I usually refer them to them as the global people, which originated the name of my company, actually.
That's right. Exactly.
Because they cannot be tagged Indian anymore or German anymore, and they don't want to, because they feel like, I have such a wealth of skills and wealth of values that I acquired in my history, that I don't want to be pinpointed to a certain cultural stereotype or cultural norm. Yeah,
that's right. Exactly. Yes.
so that's really, really helpful, I think, for everybody. Yeah,
it is
fantastic.
That is the value of looking at these models,
Very good.
is providing self-awareness and the awareness of others who you're working with.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to having discussions with individuals about their results and what they can get out of that.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Yes.
So in the focus for today, we said we wanted to focus a bit on the German speakers and the North Americans and their differences. Yeah, because this is sometimes underestimated. And in collaboration in the real world, it often leads to perception, stereotyping, negative judgment, miscommunication.
Oh, yes.
And maybe with a few, let's say, basic insights, people would understand things better. Yeah. So tell me, what do you think are the three most striking differences between German speakers and US Americans?
Absolutely. I've had the opportunity over the years to coach both Americans. And so when we'll talk about Americans being US Americans. And then when I say German, let's specify German speaking regions. And so we can make a few assumptions for these particular cultures. The first one that comes up most often is this idea of formality and informality. Americans in the perception of German speakers tend to be much more informal. They will speak, they're very friendly. I use the model of the peach and the coconut. Americans are a lot like peaches. They have a very soft outer skin, and you break through the shell very easily. Okay, in conversations, Americans will strike up a conversation with a stranger, and even in the working environment too. And then, however, when you're in a German-speaking region, they're more coconut-like. So they're more private. They have a thicker outer skin like a coconut, and it just takes longer to break through that shell. But once you do break through the shell, then what's inside of a coconut, Angie?
Fluid love.
That's right.
Pure love.
That's
you have
right.
A friend for life.
That's it. You have a friend for life. Exactly. But however, we go back to the peach, and what's inside of the peach?
A hard core.
That's right. A hard core.
Yeah.
And, not that Americans, what happens is that Americans tend to communicate, and they're friendly to so many people that they don't have time to dive into that, relationship like within the coconut milk. And I think what happens then is the perception is that Americans tend to be more surface level. Okay. That's the perception that happens. However,
Yeah.
Americans do have deep friendship, but with fewer people.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
from my experience.
Yeah. This is
So that's the first one, informality, and also the language.
Yeah.
When you think about German, the complexity of the language, there are a couple words for the English word you.
Yeah.
And so even thinking about language and the formality within the German language. The second difference would be group, more of a collective society versus an individualistic society. Now, when we look at this from a global perspective, both Americans and Germans are individualistic, much more than Asian cultures and Latin cultures and some other ones. However, if you're comparing the two, I'd have to say that Americans are more individualistic. And because historically, if you understand the American Revolution and the US, breaking away from England and wanting freedom, the country is about rights and freedom, and I want to do my own thing. Okay. I don't want to, follow, a, formal structure with a lot of rules. Okay. So Germans tend to be more, let's follow some rules. We're more consensus oriented, whereas Americans more individualistic. What do you think about that, Angie?
Yeah, I think you explained it really well, because the history here, coming from Europe to the US, fleeing religious persecution, trying to live a different lifestyle, but also, conquering the West, all of this contributed to probably a stronger need for being individualistic and standing up for your own rights.
That's right. Yes.
Whereas,
and if you look at the West, as you said, I'm in California, you even see stronger individualism, right? And informality. Maybe further east, there's a bit more formality, and so that and perhaps more group, but still, overall, it's more individualistic. So yeah.
Where I also think there's a strong difference noticeable in Europe, and I think that is something we sometimes tend to forget. Is we have more Catholic countries or regions and more Protestant regions.
Yes.
In Switzerland, for example, we have divided by the country by cantons. Some are more Catholic and some are more Protestant.
Right.
And when you look at the value system of the US, that was more determined by Protestant values.
Yeah. That's right.
So,
exactly.
Hard work, get up early in the morning, get your work done, and then, you will be rewarded.
Yes.
Whereas, Catholic have a bit of a different, maybe a bit more fatalistic, a bit more accepting of God's will. So, there's more ascription. So there's also, within Europe, that difference that I think has quite an influence on how we are as a culture.
Exactly. That's right.
And one of the things, that just came to my mind when you talked about the revolution. Obviously, Europe also had revolutions at a similar time.
Yes.
So, many countries, Germany, France, Russia, Holland, all of these countries, they try to get rid of the absolutist regimes or the power of the aristocracy.
Yes.
But then they fell back into even stronger regimes, absolutist regimes, after their freedom struggle was basically taken away from them. Yeah. So, whereas in the US and in Switzerland, for example, from the late 18th century onwards, freedom reigned. Yeah, one could say. Yeah. So there was a democratic movement that lived in both countries, maybe a bit stronger than in the, let's say, the surrounding European countries of Switzerland. So I
That's
think that's
right.
also very important to remember. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, and that goes into the idea of egalitarian and a hierarchy. You can compare that dimension as well. More democratic, more equality, yeah, versus the a hierarchy. And I think that's a difference that we note. But the third, so we've talked about the first one, informal, formal. The second, more collective or group and individualistic. And the third is a term, and the terminology is universal and particularistic. So which essentially means, do you follow the rules or do you bend the rules a bit? And US Americans tend to be more particularistic than the German speakers. And so when you think about this difference, there is in Germany a way to do things, in Switzerland and many countries that have rules. And this is how, the processes in our work environment. This is how we live with others in our communities. And this is important to follow those rules.
Yeah.
And I would say that Americans also follow rules compared to other countries and cultures. So they're, when on again a global perspective, both are more universalistic. But if you kind of take and look and compare, I would have to say that would be a difference, the third difference. What do you think, Angie?
Yeah, I think so. Strong for Switzerland and Germany, I would say, we have a strong need for protocol, following protocol, following processes, and rules are there, to be kept. And because it's a strongly universalistical approach, also, in the legal system, for example, versus the case system that you have in the US. Here, what we also think is everybody should follow the same standards. Yeah. So unlike many other countries, status should not help you to get around the rules. Yeah. So I think this is, something that is maybe also really, something that transpired from the legal system, etc. Rules are for everybody, but also everybody has to follow the same standards and be measured by the same standards. There's a strong, let's say, a strong need for equity. Yeah.
Yes.
And treating people fairly.
Yes, absolutely. Good. So those are the three that come to mind as far as differences between the two.
Well, that's really helpful and very well explained. Thanks so much. And I think we both know there are also a lot of stereotypes. And one of the things I noticed this afternoon when I was researching a few YouTube videos was there seems to be a very strong stereotype, and I've heard this a lot already in intercultural seminars in the past. And sometimes, I feel a bit embarrassed about this, is that Germans don't seem to have humor. Yeah. So how do you, how do you explain that? Why is there such a perception in the US?
Yes, exactly. Well, I think not only Germans, but any culture, the humor is one of the last things you learn in a culture, not only because of the shared circumstances that people have, but also language. When you speak in two languages, I think it's lost in translation. And I believe German is a fairly unique, complex language that do you think that has some implication into the message and humor that is transmitted?
Yeah. I think, and I noticed that sometimes even between like High German speakers and Swiss German speakers, that irony does not really translate.
Yes.
So, irony. And I think this is the same in English. If you understand irony in a foreign language, you have to have a very high level of that language. So in order to capture that joke that is supposed to be sarcasm or irony, you have to have a very high level of English.
English.
Because otherwise what happens is you take it as face value. Yeah.
Yes.
And one of the things, I think that in Germany we like to do a lot is we like to make a lot of fun by saying things in a way that might sound serious, but that are actually ironic.
Ironic, right. And that's the humor
But that
is,
doesn't translate into English most of the time.
no, absolutely. Yes.
So,
Exactly.
like as in most cultures, it's not so easy to get the humor.
That's
But
right.
I would say
Yes.
Germans can be very funny. Yeah. If
Mm-hmm.
you let them.
That's
And
right.
then one thing I heard today on one of the TED Talks was there's a time for everything. Yeah. So,
Yes.
like we're very strong at compartmentalizing.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we work, we work. There's
That's
no
right.
time for fun at work. Yeah.
Yes,
But then
exactly.
after work, when we have a drink, there's time for fun.
That's right. That's true. Yes, yes. Very much, yeah, scheduled time and the importance of time and managing time and seeing them as measurements of time. And I think that's another important difference. Although Americans tend to be punctual, they're punctual like right at the minute. Like we have a 9 o'clock meeting, Americans will be there at 9 o'clock. However, the Germans will be there at 8:55, 5 minutes early before the meeting starts, and that is on time. Okay, so again, I think there's a bit of a cultural difference that's important to understand as well.
And I would say the Swiss, they're probably there 10 minutes before the meetings.
And they're 10 minutes before. Okay, okay. Well, there you go.
So, like even again, there's a difference between Germany and Switzerland when it
That's
comes
right.
to,
Yes.
the importance of time
Of
and time measurement.
Yes. Well, the other one that we need to mention is communication styles, with Americans being a little more indirect than a German directness. So Germans are very much explicit, like to say things, exactly with using the words to explain something, whereas Americans might not be quite as direct. And so that would be another difference that is well noted.
Yeah, yeah. And often here, there's also a translation issue. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Germans in management or in business often come across as rude and aggressive because they just don't know how to write friendly in English. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they don't know how friendly works. And then,
right.
they also put 3 exclamation marks in emails, and people don't really like that.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
I understand why there's frustration on both ends, but I also think, sometimes it's a matter of discussion and negotiation and
Yes.
talking about these things and making them
Exactly.
explicit and understanding that these are cultural differences, that it's not personal, that it's not because, A doesn't like B, that they're writing this funny email with 3 exclamation marks. But this is
Right.
just a cultural thing that
Yes.
maybe, we can also get over these things.
That's right. Exactly. So yeah, understanding each other and
Yeah.
ourselves first, understanding our preferences, and
Yeah.
then understanding others, and
Yeah.
we're able to collaborate much more effectively.
Absolutely. So tell me, well, let's wrap up. Is there anything else you would like to share with our viewers?
Oh, well, I think it's important to take the ICBI and really take a look at it and determine, is this me? How do I interact with others? And is there a way I might change, my style to work effectively with others? And if some of those are more non-negotiable, then have a conversation and come up with ways of working together with your team. And so that's I think an important thing that we do, with our clients. So important to do that. And and I also invite your viewers to join us every month for a session. It's an open session. It's called Elevate Your Cultural Intelligence. And that is an open learning community where we have people from all over the world attend. And it's usually in Europe around 5 p.m. And the dates vary. So if anyone is interested, please email us at info@culturalbusinessconsulting.com. I know that's a long email, but anyway, info@culturalbusinessconsulting.com. And we'd be happy to share and talk more about some of these cultural differences.
Yeah, I can highly recommend those sessions. I've attended many already. It's always been very good atmosphere, but also very educational, lots of takeaways. And it's really helpful to share your own cultural stories and get a new perspective also on them. And I will share the email ID in the show notes as well. So in case someone didn't catch it, you can find it below this video afterwards. Val, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, so much fun, and still also I think we learned a lot today. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. All the best to everyone in working across cultures. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.